church. I was waiting for Tiffany and the praise team to come forward and sing. And I thought, yoo-hoo, I've got a few more seconds. Okay. Welcome to this church. I'll be preaching today from Judges chapter 6. I've got some worksheets for some of the little kids who'd like a worksheet related to the sermon. Well, I've been corrected. For anyone that would like a worksheet to do with the sermon. Yeah. Please come forward and get one. Uncle Corey will give them out. Thank you, Uncle Corey. Now, it's no secret to anyone who comes to this church that I love stories. I grew up in a culture where, in the country in Zimbabwe, in a place called Ndabazinduna, where every night we would sit around the fire and our grandma would go tell us stories. So I love stories. And I particularly love underdog stories, where somebody who's small and tiny defeats somebody who's strong. I like movies like that. In fact, I'll confess to you that I've cried when I've watched movies where the underdog wins. I've actually wept, which is a paradox, because I don't cry for meaningful things, but I cry for stuff like that. Okay, one of my favorite movies is Sea Biscuit. It's about a horse that was not given a chance and about a jockey that was not given a chance. But when those two came together, they became a mighty force, and they beat a horse that had the best trainer, the best money thrown at it. I have to tell you, I think I watched this on my own, and I cried like a baby, wept when that underdog won. Okay, I love underdog stories, David and Goliath, and those are my stories. Okay, so today I'll be sharing with you from Judges chapter 6 and 7. It's the story of Gideon. And when we come across Gideon, I have to explain, first of all, some background info. Judges comes after Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and then there's Judges. So at the time of Judges, the children of Israel had made it into the promised land. They were instructed on the way to the promised land that when you get there, you must destroy utterly all the inhabitants of that land, because if you don't, they will influence you and you learn their practices and they sacrifice their children, and don't intermarry with them, because when you do that, you'll get into trouble. They did not listen. They got into the promised land, and we learn that in the book of Judges that those nations rose up against them and they became a thorn in their flesh. Okay, they bothered them. And the children of Israel went through a cycle of where they would join those armies, those nations, and they'll do as they did. And then God would say to them, come back to me, and they wouldn't come. They went through a cycle of going into apostasy, of sinning and doing evil. Like I said, sacrificing their children, worshipping Baal and Asherah and all the Canaanite gods. And then God would leave them to their devices. I think the word shared in Judges 6 is it gave them over. I'll cover this in a minute. But God will leave them to their devices. Those people will then oppress them utterly until they felt sick up to here. And when they got sick of being oppressed, they would then cry to God, and then God would raise a judge. In Judges 3-5, we find that first of all, God raised Othniel. And when Othniel came up, and he judged them, the children came to God. But when Othniel died, the children of Israel went back to their pagan worship. And then the cycle began, they cried again, and then God raised up Ehud. And then when Ehud came, the left-handed man, Arnold, when Ehud came, he judged them, and they followed God for the period when Ehud was alive. But when Ehud died, they went back to the idol worship. And then God raised up Shamgar, a man who used a farming instrument to destroy many Philistines. But when Shamgar died, then they went back. Then God raised up a woman. Yeah, God raised up a woman. Okay, God is no respecter of persons. If when God needs something done, he would raise up the best person to do the job. And he raised up Deborah. And Deborah went and beat the armies of Sisera. We know the story. And so Deborah was a judge. So now we get to Judges 6 and 7. And once again, after Deborah died, the children of Israel go back to their ways. And we're at Judges 6. And it says, in verse 1, it says, the children of Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Thank you, Gracie. And he delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. And now, Midian joined up with one of the other eastern tribes, and they descended upon Israel like locusts. It says they came in such numbers, their sheep, their camels, everything. They were nomad people, which means they didn't have a home. They'd go from place to place. They would raid. So when they landed in Israel, they were like locusts. Now, those of you that were here at 10 o'clock, I showed the children some locusts. Now, locusts are creatures like this. You won't be able to see them, but you can come and have a look afterwards, okay, if you're interested. And locusts, when they land in an area and they swarm, they absolutely, utterly destroy everything. I've seen them destroy a maize field, and they'll eat even the stalk of the maize field and leave nothing. So this is what the Midianites did. They came as locusts, and they absolutely destroyed everything for 7 years. Not only did they destroy the land, but they also persecuted the children of Israel. And the children of Israel eventually, after 7 years of this, cried out to God. So God raised up a prophet. Okay. Well, before that, I just wondered, who were the Midianites? Okay. The Midianites, Midian was the son of Abraham by his third wife Keturah. And Amalekites, with whom the Midianites came, was Abraham's great-great-grandson. So God used the relatives of the Israelites to come and bring them back to him. I want to submit straight away that sometimes God may have to use a family member to bring you back to him. And God is no respecter of person, like I said. He'll use a family member. And remember, I said the children of Israel were in this situation because they hadn't followed God. They hadn't been listening. And they hadn't destroyed the nations that God has said to destroy. I want to submit to you today that the things that you destroy in your life as a parent will sadly affect your children. I went through some things, and I'm going through some things that because my father didn't conquer in his life or didn't submit to God in his life, or because his grandparents didn't submit to God in his life. So we have to be careful that things that we don't allow God to control and subjugate and control in our lives, those things may affect us. So it is incumbent upon us to let God deal with whatever we have. So the Israelites cried out of God after 7 years of persecution. So God sent a prophet, and the prophet told them that, listen, you are in this situation because God told you to destroy these nations, and you haven't. Not only have you not destroyed them, but you have intermarried with them, and you've adopted their practices. You are worshipping Baal. You're worshipping Asherah. In fact, throughout Israel, there were groves and there were altars to Baal and poles to Asherah. And so they worshipped just like the Canaanites did. And then after they cried out to God, God in verse 11, Gracie, in verse 11, the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, the son of Joash of the tribe of Manasseh. Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Now, when I read that, I thought, threshing wheat in a winepress. Okay. I remember when I was growing up, like I said, my first few years I grew up in the country. And we'd have Yugo beans in visit. We'd have Yugo beans, and they would be dried out. And then my grandma would take a branch, and they would whack on the Yugo beans to shell them, and they'll whack that branch. So you thresh that, and then they'll put all that stuff in a winnowing basket, which was a big circular thing. And then they'll throw that, and all the chaff will be blown away. Now, that kind of job is done in an open, aerated space so that the chaff can blow away. We have Gideon, an Israelite, threshing in a winepress. Winepress were in an underground vat. So Gideon is threshing wheat in an underground vat. He's hiding away. Okay, so Gideon, in fact, let me take that back. Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine vat in the promised land. Okay, this was not supposed to be the story. When the children of Israel left Egypt, they were to go to a land of milk and honey. I showed you earlier again, those that were here, honey. That was the Israelite ethos. Everyone said, we're going to Canaan, the land of milk and honey. And they got to Canaan, and they were not living the Israelite dream. This wasn't the way it was supposed to be. Now I have a question. Anybody here a first-generation immigrant? You flew here from another place, you came by boat from another place, and maybe you came here by a rubber dinghy from another place. Maybe you even swam here from another place. Any first-generation people? Okay, yes. When you came here, What was your hope? Did you say, I'm going to England to suffer? How many people said they were going to England to suffer? No, none of you. You came here because you believed that there was something for you in this land from which you could benefit. I can tell you my story. I remember back in Zimbabwe, I was talking with my cousin who'd been here before. Her name's Mildred. So she's been here, educated here, went back to Zimbabwe. And we were just talking after I did my A-levels. And we're planning about what I could do. And then she facilitated for me to come to the UK. And then as soon as I got that plane ticket, it was like, oh my goodness, I am going to heaven. I'm going to England. Obviously, I told a few family members, and I told a few friends, and everybody told everybody else. So I would see people in church, and they'll be saying to you, oh, Brian, are you going to the UK? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to the UK. I'm going to the UK, man. And I made it look like it was a normal thing. But inside, I was buzzing. I was doing somersaults. I'm going to the UK, yeah. Yeah, my sister, I'll be going to the UK. And people will be whispering, oh, is that the Brian that's going to the UK? And I would hear people respond, yeah, that's the Brian that's going to the UK. And the Brian that's going to the UK would just pretend that it's not a big deal, and I'd just walk like it's not a big deal. But for me, it was an absolute big deal. I was going to the UK. I remember when I landed here, I had my summer clothes, because you think it's hot here. This is not hot. Okay, it was hot in Zimbabwe. I came in October. And those that know, in October, it is very hot in Zim. And I had a light shirt and a light jacket, just in case it was cold in England. And I remember coming out of that aeroplane, right? I came out of that aeroplane into the airport, and we were driving from Heathrow, and I couldn't believe just how damp and dark, and the streets were dirty, and the houses were covered with soot. And I looked at the people that had come to pick me up. It's like, what, is this England? Or maybe is there another one? For me, it was like, and I don't mean to demean this, but it was like a great disappointment. I came here with the expectation that this was the land of milk and honey, that I would get what I desired and I'd be okay. I would make my first million by the time I was 25, then I'd go back home. That was my expectation. So I can absolutely understand how Gideon responded to the angel when the angel told him in verse 13 that the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Because the angel approached Gideon and he said, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. And Gideon's response was, oh my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where are all the miracles which our fathers told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us unto the hands of the Midianites. Gideon thought he was going to the UK. He thought he was going to the land of milk and honey. And then his experience did not match what he believed. It did not match what he had been told. So he absolutely disbelieved. He basically said, Lord, can you not see where I am right now? I'm threshing wheat in a wine press. How can the Lord be with us if we are not living the milk and honey dream? I just want to submit to you, how you view yourself impacts your life. At that particular time, Gideon himself saw himself as somebody oppressed, as somebody who needed to hide away, as somebody who needed saving. He saw himself as oppressed. How you view yourself impacted. If Gideon had known how God had seen him, he would have conducted himself different. To Gideon, Israel being overrun by the Midianites was an indicator that God was not with them. He saw himself as defeated and acted as one defeated. May I just blow that up? There are some of us who have decided we're ill, and you conduct yourself as you're ill. Oh, how are you? Oh, my goodness, I'm so unwell. Oh, I'm unwell. And some of us have decided that we're failures. Oh, can you do this? Oh, no, I can't do this. No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't possibly do this. And some have decided that we are not good looking. Or we are ugly because social media tells us something. And you conduct yourself, you don't show yourself. So how you look at yourself impacts how you project your life and how you live your life. All I can say is do not measure your reality based on what others say you are or based on what your perception of is. You should measure your reality based on God's words. My self-confidence comes from this word. I can tell you, you would never in a million years catch Brian preaching. Never. Never. Yeah, it is not my thing. I shared with Brother Tony, if you're watching this, I shared with a Perkins Mike. Where's Mike? I shared with the Perkins my pre-preaching ritual that I'm not going to share with everyone here. Okay, because I have a ritual that I go through before I can come up here. And I shared with the Perkins. If you're watching Brother Tony, this is for you. Today I had to do that ritual twice before I came up with that. Because for me, this is a scary place. I don't want to be up here. I'd rather be sitting in the congregation like you. This is a scary place because when I come up here, I see myself as not being able to talk to you and honorable God. Who am I? I'm just Brian. I'd rather be sitting there watching. But I can tell you, God can take you from where you are and move you from where He wants you to be. God can use anybody. I stress again, God is not a respecter of person. God is interested in what He can do through you to achieve His purposes. Okay. If you find that you're being oppressed by Midianites, remember whose you are and come back to God with all your heart. Now, the angel of the Lord said to Gideon, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." He used the singular you, and Gideon read it as next verse, please, Gracie. Verse 14, I think. If the Lord is with us. Gideon read it as if he was talking to the entire nation. Okay. No, go back. Sorry, darling. I'm confusing you. Go back to 13. Thank you. If the Lord is with us, okay, that's how Gideon read it. But the angel said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." He was talking singular. He said, "The Lord is with you, Gideon." And who was actually talking to Gideon at the time? Who was talking to Gideon at the time? The angel of the Lord. And as Seventh-day Adventists, who do we know the angel of the Lord to be? Jesus, God. So if God is in the presence of Gideon and is telling Gideon, "The Lord is with you," Gideon, is God telling the truth? Because God but at that time was in close proximity with Gideon. But God was talking more than proximity. He was talking about purpose and power. And so God was saying, "I am with you right now, Gideon." And He didn't call him Gideon. He called him mighty warrior. You have a mighty warrior skulking in an underground vat. And God says to him, "You're a mighty warrior." Because God wasn't talking to him based on his situation. He was talking to him based on what He could do through him. So when God calls you a mighty warrior, that is because He can make you a mighty warrior. Now, I'll skip that. The Lord's presence in yours and my life is not dependent on our goodness, but rather on God's goodness. Lamentations 3:22-23 says, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed." Can I take this off? I'm absolutely baking. My wife said to me earlier, "Don't go up there with that jacket. You know, you're going to burn. It's a furnace." And I said, "You know what? I have to put the jacket on. I'm going up on the platform." Okay. Thank you. I'm absolutely baking up here. And I'm from Zimbabwe. Yeah. Okay. So it must really be hot. Okay. Lamentations 3:22-23. "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because His compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is our faithfulness." You know, I found out that the name Gideon means a hacker. And by hacker, I don't mean a computer hacker. It means somebody that hacks, somebody who hacks down, okay? It also, that name means a fella, and I don't mean a man. I mean somebody who cuts down, who fells. One who hews down or one who cuts off. So Gideon's very name means one who chops down, okay? So Gideon's parents called him, they didn't know this, but they called him prophetically one who chops down. By chopping down, imagine a machete. Okay, so Gideon's name means chop down with a machete. So Gideon had a prophetic calling on him, even from a baby, and he didn't even know it. Okay, so Gideon was a hacker, or one who hacks down, or who hews down, or who cuts off from birth. Okay, that's what his name implied at birth. But he also became that because the Lord was with him. Okay, he was a mighty warrior, one who hacks down because the Lord was with him. Okay, so the Lord turned to him, verse 14, and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand." Am I not sending you? Okay, I said to you, Gideon was in a wine press, and God says, go in the strength you have. Gideon is a farmer. He's threshing. He's obviously physically fit. We know that when you read later in verse chapter 7 and 8, he had servants. He had at least more than 10 servants. So he was a man of some means, but he was humble enough to be threshing the wheat himself. If I had servants and there's Midianites that could catch me, I'm not threshing the wheat myself. I'm letting the servants do it. Okay. So Gideon was a humble man. So God is saying, go in the strength that you have. He's saying, whatever I have given you, what you're born with, that's how I want you to go. I don't want you to have any superpowers or anything like that. I want you to go in the strength that you have. A similar charge is given to you. God has given you a strength, a gift, a skill in whatever area He wants you to serve. He doesn't want you to become like anybody else. He says, go in the strength that you have, and then He can empower you to do what you need to do. I found this quote because God found Gideon working. I found this quote in the SDA Bible commentary, and it says, "It is worthy of note that when God appears to men to call them to a task or to give them a message from heaven, He generally calls on those who are busy, perhaps with a common everyday task. A person employed in honest business is more likely to receive heavenly visitors than one who spends his time in idleness, for God cannot use lazy men in His cause." I say this because of the time of year in which we are. It is nominating time. God does not call lazy men and women. God requires you to serve in a particular capacity. Gideon gave an excuse, and we're going to look at it in verse 15 in a minute. But you are not to give an excuse when God calls you. You are to do what He calls you to. In verse 15, Gideon said, "O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." The guy's got at least 10 servants. Okay, and he's saying he's poor. He could afford to sacrifice 2 bulls, as you will find out when you read chapter 6 and 7. So he's of some means, but he's making excuses. What is your excuse when God comes to get you to serve? We are a church of 1,000 excuses. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I've got this. Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, I'm going here. I'm doing this. When will that stop? When you allow God to use you as He wants to use you. Faith is believing that God will do. Faith is believing that God can and will do what He says He will do for you. Do you have any doubts about yourself, about your abilities? I can't do that because I'm young. I can't do it because I'm old. Stop prophesying negativity into your life. I can't do it because I'm old. Okay, you're going to age pretty quick, yeah? Okay, I can't do it because I don't have the money. You know what? You're going to be broke. You are prophesying all this negative. The scripture says, I can do all things through Christ who can give you strength. When God calls you to ask you to serve, let Him and say yes to Him, because He can empower you. When He calls you, He empowers you. You don't have to be somebody special to do something special for God. There isn't a class of super people that God uses. The task that God sends you to do is what perfects you. God works on you while you are serving. I listened to a sermon by Henry Wright that really moved you. It's called War Stories. When you have time, YouTube Henry Wright War Stories. And he says, your ministry is the thing that God uses to perfect your character. And some of us are running away from ministry, yet we are saying we are looking forward to the coming of God. Your ministry is the thing that goes to perfect your character. There are no passengers here. I came to the UK in a passenger plane. There was a pilot and a co-pilot, and I was served. In God's church, there's a pilot and a co-pilot and another one, God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But everybody else is a steward and a stewardess in that place. Our job is to invite other people to come into this ministry. There is no passenger. Now, from Judges 6:16 to 39, God assures Gideon 7 times that He'll be with him. It took 7 takes before Gideon actually believed what God was saying. Okay, I don't want to keep you long, so I will fly through this. In one instance, when he's sacrificing a goat, okay, God comes and the goat is on a rock, and God touches the rock, and fire erupts from the rock and consumes the sacrifice. And then the angel of the Lord goes up, and Gideon says, oh my goodness, it's God, I've seen God, I'm going to die. Then God then assures him, no, you're not going to die. Okay, I'm the one sending you, you're not going to die. Then a second time, he speaks to him in a dream. Go and break down the Asherah pole and the altar of Baal. And he goes and does that, and he takes 10 of his servants and he breaks down the altar. And then God speaks to him again at a time. He says, blow a trumpet and invite people to come. Gideon did not 7 times. Gideon didn't believe that God was with him. 7 times. If you read chapter 6 of Judges and chapter 7, God tried to tell him, listen, I am with you. And my favorite one, where's that fleece, Ruth? It's down there. My favorite one is the fleece on the threshing floor, okay? Gideon went to God and said, right, okay, God, if it's really you, I'm going to take your fleece, right? And I'm going to put it on the threshing floor. And if you're God and you're sending me, I want this thing to be wet and everything else dry, okay? That morning, fleece is wet, okay? Gideon picked it up in one take, okay? The fleece wrung out about a cup of water. Then Gideon's scientific brain kicked in. Well, actually, if I put this on the ground and there's moisture around it, naturally through capillary action, the moisture is going to move from the ground to the fleece. So let me change the thing. I want everything to be wet and this to be dry. So the next morning, the fleece was dry and everything was wet. So Gideon said, okay, I believe you now. So Gideon picks up a trumpet, okay, and he blows the trumpet and announces to everyone. I'm not going to blow it, I promise. He picks up a trumpet and announces to everybody, come, we're coming to war. So there's people from Asher, from Zebulun, from Naphtali, and he called them to come, and 32,000 people come. 32,000. Now, before you get excited, there were over 135,000 Midianites. 32,000 people come, okay? And it says in chapter 6, verse 34, that the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. And when I researched this word, it says that Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. So the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. Now, I don't know about you, I want to be clothed in the Spirit, right? Clarence Jackson yesterday, last week, isn't he? He was talking about drip, whatever. For me, when I was growing up, it was clover. Okay, that's what it was when I was growing up. Okay, but then there's no drip, there's no clover, there's no bling than being clothed with the Holy Spirit. I challenge you to let God clothe you with His Spirit. Okay, so Gideon is clothed with His Spirit. But when he announces the call for the men to come forward and 32,000 people come over, who else hears the call? The Midianites hear the call. But they were not bothered. They were absolutely not bothered because they saw themselves as conquerors. Not only did they see themselves as conquerors, but even the children of Israel saw themselves as defeated. And you know what? Because when God said, there's too many people for me to save Midian, let those who are scared go home. Okay. Those who are scared go home. Now, why would God let the cowards go home? It was actually a rule in Israel that if you're a coward and didn't want to go home, okay, and people go home, when you're in a fight, right, you want to know there's somebody covering your back. You want to know there's somebody that's back. You don't want that person to suddenly dash off and leave your flank or your back exposed, okay? Now, when we're having a Christian fight and you need somebody to pray with you, you don't want any wishy-washy person. You want to know that you have somebody who's brave and who can face the enemy, covering your flank and your back. So Gideon said, those who are scared, go home. And 22,000 people went home and 10,000 were left. Now, Gideon says, and God still said, oh, there are too many. There are too many. And so they went to the waterside. You know the story. They went to the water and said, let some drink, make them drink. And God gave them the water test. And those who drank like they were doing a press up, God said, you go one way. And those who drank like who left the water, kneeling down, okay, God said, you go on one side. And then God said, with those who leapt like this, the water with their hands, I'm going to save you. 300 men. I said there was about 135 Midianites. The odds are like 1 to 450. Actually, I know some of you are mathematicians. It's 1 to 448.504. Those were the odds. Okay. 1 Israelite to 149 Midianites. So the odds were very much against them. But God assures Gideon that he's with him. But God, being God, saw Gideon's mannerism. And he said to Gideon, if you're still scared, I want you to go to the Midianite camp. And you hear somebody say something. So Gideon went down to the Midianite camp. What does that tell us about Gideon? He was still scared. After 7 or 8 episodes of God showing him that he was with him, Gideon was still scared. So he went to the camp, and when he sat at the camp, he had one Midianite speak to the other. He took his servant Purah and he went there. Verse 14 of chapter 7. Gideon and Purah, and he had a Midianite telling his friend about his dream. A round of barley bread rolled into the Midianite camp and hit a tent and caused it to collapse. Okay? And the other Midianite interpreted this as, this can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. Gideon had his enemies recognize his calling. I want to tell you, your enemies know what God has called you to do. And they'll do everything to frustrate you and to take you away from the destiny to which God is calling you. Your enemies are aware. Isn't it a shame that your enemies know and recognize your calling and you don't? Why are we still timid when we have such evidence of God delivering? And yet the enemies know. The people at your work know you're a Christian. And yet you're shy to show they know. You don't have to hide it, they know. God assures Gideon that he's with him. And God has his enemies recognize his name and his calling. At this point, chapter 7, verse 15, thank you, Gracie. Gideon accepts that God is with him. So, and when that happens, he bows down and worships him. I pray that when God reveals your purpose to you, you will bow down and worship with him, whether you're in the borders of the Midianite or not, that you bow down and worship him. Gideon was no longer afraid. He bowed down and worshipped him right on the outskirts of the Midianite camp. Gideon then went back and called his people and said, get up, the Lord has given the Midianites camp into your hands. Now, I want to invite the 300 that I called earlier to come forward. Okay. He gave each one of them a trumpet. So I want my 300 to come forward. I spoke to you earlier. All my 300 come forward. Everyone sitting in the corridor, you are Midianites. You are Midianites. The Midianites were asleep. And they were carefree. Take a trumpet and stand in the aisles. Just surround the Midianites. Take one and go around. Quickly. Just grab one, any color. Sorry. Yeah, I'll put it down there. Take one and go just stand in the corridor. Where are the rest of the PowerPoint? Come forward if you're in the primary class or the PowerPoint, come get a whistle. Ruth, please wake my son up. Yeah. Listen, I don't want war in my house. Yeah, he's been looking forward to this. Jesse, come on, Baba. There you go. Come, Keone. Stand in the corridors, just surround the Midianites. Yeah, stand in the aisle. Just pick one. Okay? Stand in the aisle. Go on, Charlotte. Pick one up, Charlotte. Any color. Take pink. I need some people on that side and some on the front here. Okay? So Gideon divided his band into 3 groups, 100, 100, and 100. We're just going to spread out thinly here. There you go. Do you have one? Okay. Okay, now, when they went to the Midianite camp, it was in the 3rd watch. The 3rd watch is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So the Midianites were fast asleep. Now, this is going to be easy for some of you because you are dozing off already. all the Midianites, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. You were fast asleep. If you are sitting in an aisle, you are a Midianite. All the Midianites close their eyes. Don't blow just yet. You have to wait for Gideon. Okay. All the Midianites, I cannot believe there's Midianites cheating. Can all the Midianites close their eyes, please? Okay. Thank you. And so when I give the command, you guys do everything that I do, the U300. I'm going to blow my trumpet, and I'm going to say, for the Lord and for Gideon. I'm not going to, in fact, I'm going to put my hand down to tell you to blow, because I want you, please, Midianite, please can you close your eyes? There's a Midianite right there staring at me. Okay. When I put my hand down like this, I want you to blow your trumpet as loud as you can. They know he's coming, but let's see how they react. Okay, and then shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. For the Lord and for Gideon. Thank you, thank you. And the Midianites were thrown into confusion. They ran away and they started killing one another. And then the children of Israel just watched them kill one another. 120,000 of them died. Thank you. And the children of Israel stopped blowing their trumpets. The 300 stopped blowing their trumpets and they went back to their seats. Okay. Now, in closing, God delivered Gideon with a few things. He didn't have much, but the little that he had, God used. And I'm saying to you, the little that you bring to God, he can use. Go to your seat, guys. Go to your seat, please. Here, go sit down. Go sit down with your mommies and daddy. Okay. God was able to use Gideon. And I want you to understand that God has got you, whatever your situation may be. I don't know who your Midianites are, but all I can say to you that God's got you. Your Midianite may be a health Midianite. Your Midianite may be a financial Midianite. But I say if you submit yourself to God, God will help you. God's got you, and God has called you to be messengers for him. I shared this morning in Sabbath school that we are called to share the message to everyone, to tell the world that Jesus is coming. The world is where you work. The world is your neighbor. Do your neighbors know that you're a Christian? Do your neighbors know that you're expecting Jesus is coming again? All I invite you to be is true to your calling. Thank you, and God bless you.